G'day, thought I'd make a quick video on the 5R55 NSW. Apart from solenoid issues with these, I seem to get a lot of questions related to no forward, no drive, intermittently or until the transmission warms up, or sometimes even that they need to rev it before it engages gear. Now I'll just show you what the main issues are. Now we'll start with the pump. I've got the pump apart here. There's a little skid plate or separator plate. You want to check that the separator plate isn't worn there where the pump gears run on. This is the drive gear, the one that drives the other gear. That one's connected on the torque converter. Now you want to make sure in here there's a little O-ring. They are known to flatten out, and that O-ring always faces up when you pull it apart, or it goes onto the converter neck first. When you reassemble it, make sure that it's facing that way. Now, the main issue with the no forward, no reverse, or you need to rev it, is this little valve here. And that's a flow valve. You've got to carefully get it out so you don't damage this surface here. You don't want to get a little burr on it. And if you have a look, in there's a little hole. So they are precision fitted in there. What you need to do is just, I've got this little pointy scribe there. I'm going to be levering it out, and I've also got this little bend on my screwdriver. And on this side, where these two main grooves are, you'll find that on that valve there are two little slots. Now what happens is these valves wear out, or the rubber O-ring on there flattens out, and you get cross leaks there, and that's what causes that no drive intermittently or all the time issue. So to get it out, we just try and push that in that hole there. There we go, it's coming out quite easily. You can feel it, it should come out hard because you know then that it's located in there very well. There we go, that's what it looks like. You can see that little pin that I've sort of pushed that scribe into there and just helping it come out like that. You can either pull all that apart and clean it, or what we like to do is we upgrade. Basically it's just this, the valve kit pump flow control valve replacement with the Sonnax version. There are a few other versions out there, very similar to the old one. The O-ring's very critical on these, and that just sits on top if you remember from earlier. The design of it's slightly different. You can see there's the original one on the right, the dirty one. They are slightly different and the design is different, and it's actually an improvement. These ones tend to last a lot longer than these ones. So that's just a matter of dropping that back in there, putting the O-ring on, reassembling the pump as per usual. On the Sonnax website, sonnax.com, Sonnax, and you can just see basically it just drops in there like that. You push it in and it's got there basically all your instructions there. It's very simple to do. Now there are other versions of the same sort of thing out there. SuperiorTransmission.com, they also make their version of it. The choice is yours. It doesn't really matter which brand you use. It is an improvement on the factory one anyway. And the other thing that can cause these sort of issues are leaks on the valve body. Now you'll notice on your valve body you've got all these little end plugs on the valves. Haven't got it apart, but what you can do, you press them and they should be nice and tight. If they go in and out too easily and too freely, like that one there does, they are a bit loose, you can install one of these. Now that's the Sonnax valve body end plug zip kit. It's like a partial zip kit. Some zip kits have other valves and other modifications they've done. This is just purely the end plug kit. And basically all it is, they're the end plugs, and you have these little O-rings that actually sit on there instead of it just being a solid aluminium sleeve that seals in there. When they're new, they're nice and tight and they seal properly, but over time, as the valve's pulsating, these end plugs tend to sort of jiggle in there and they wear out. So the improvement is, what they do is they put an O-ring in there. Now when you're fitting these plugs in, quite often the end of where the bore hole is very sharp, so you've got to actually very, very gently just tap, have pressure on that plug and just tap it very, very gently. I like to use the end of a plastic screwdriver like that, and you just want to get it to find its own way in. You don't want to force it in, or you will risk putting a little nick in one of the O-rings and then it sort of defeats the purpose. It's going to leak at that point. It will reduce the leak, but the idea is to seal that up as 100%. Quite often, an easy, inexpensive way to fix that problem is by putting one of these little end plug zip kits in. And you also don't need to remove the transmission to do that. You can just drop the valve body. The one in the pump, you have to actually remove the transmission and pop the pump out to replace that one. There's the Sonnax website instructions there on those little end plugs there. It's quite easy to put them in. You don't need to ream anything or anything special or special tools. They show you where the single and the double seal plugs go, and it also mentions that all the plugs, you need to put the threaded hole on the outside of the valve just so you can pull it out at some later stage. It'll be very difficult to pull out. You just put a little threaded bolt or something in there and you can wiggle them out if you need to. And it also helps to install them. A little bit more information there on which end plugs have the single O-ring and which ones have the double O-ring. You just refer it back to that diagram. But that's all available on the Sonnax website, and it's always good to have a look at that website because it's got a lot of free information on not just this transmission, on nearly every transmission. So check it out. The O-ring. A little O-ring in there. They're on about 40 thou. And the new one, about 55 thou. So 15 thou flattened out. That's probably about 0.4 of a mil. And I think that O-ring there just stops the driven gear on the converter neck from chattering. And now remember that that O-ring goes to the outside, or goes onto the converter first. And there are two little marks, they go in. Usually on most pumps, the little notches in there will be on the visual side. I don't know why they've put them on the opposite side on these. And now I like to also, you'll see that there's those slots in there where the drive is off the torque converter. I like to put them either straight up or down, or across that way. That way, when you're aligning it all, it's easier to sort of fit the torque converter in. On the torque converter, you've generally got three things that are trying to line up. And you'll be trying to line up the stator splines, the input splines, and the drive on the converter neck, on the drive gear on the pump. Make sure you use the approved or compatible transmission fluid. New bushing, new seal, new O-ring. Before you tighten the pump up, you've got to use an alignment tool, and that sort of rests on the stator shaft and on where the bush is, where the converter neck goes in. And you still might need to just wriggle that around, just align those bolt holes a little bit. We'll get a midpoint. There. Now I've got this little mesh here that I like to work on. One, it keeps everything nice and clean. The oil just drips into the tray. Another thing I can do is hold things with it when I'm tightening them up. A couple of screwdrivers in there, and you've got to torque these up. You can see that just holds the pump. Because it's an odd shape, you can't really tighten it in your vise. T40, and you do those up to 25 Newton meter, and that's about 1820 foot pound, not inch pound, foot pound. That's alright. Now you'll notice I haven't removed this gasket here. You can reuse serviceable parts. You don't always have to replace things like that. Okay, now we can remove the alignment tool, and that should be nicely aligned there like that. We've got the valve body apart, and we've gone through it, cleaned them all up, made sure there's no muck in there, and all the valves are shuttling properly. There's a good valve, there you go. That one there. And that valve, if you have a look, you'll see that it's loose. It's actually moving. I can push it with my finger and it's just moving in and out. A little bit hard to see on the camera there, but I can assure you that it is very loose in that bore there. And I've printed up the sheet, and it's actually modulator control valve, this one here, on there. A little clip like that. And we just wriggle that out. Now quite often, because they're moving in and out like that, they've worn a little step in there, so sometimes they do take a bit to get out. And there we go. And you want to be careful not to damage anything in it. You got to, when I do valve bodies, I like to do the valves one by one, clean it through, put it back in, make sure there's no little wear marks on there. These valves, the aluminium's anodized, it's hardened, so quite often the bore in the actual valve body housing will wear out. And I do have other videos that you can check that out with. But what we're going to do, if we have a look on that chart, the modulator valve is a 1 seal end plug. So we need the one with the 1 groove. All the O-rings are all the same in the kit. We just put that on carefully like that. Put that into there. Put a little bit of oil on there. Like that. Put the valve back in, modulator valve. Make sure that that valve is nice and free. You can see that it's not binding or anything. And then basically we just push that plug in. We move it in and you'll see that it is, even the plug on its own is pretty tight. But what we need to do, just like I mentioned earlier, I get there and I just tap, and I'm actually moving it around like this as I'm tapping, keeping the tension on that O-ring so it just finds its own way into that bore. There we go. It's just gone in. And we need to just position it where it was. Probably gone in a little bit too much. And that's why you need to actually have this there, just so you can pull it back out if you need to. There we go. And that's in the position in the groove there. Little spring steel end plug. You want to be careful they don't fly back out at you. And there we go. And when that gets pressure to it, it'll just push out to it anyway. Like that. Remove that. Job's done. There you go. You can see I'm actually pushing quite hard on that, and it's tight anyway. I reckon that would have been tighter even without the O-ring on there. And now it's just a matter of going through and replacing the rest of them as per that diagram on the Sonnax site. Anyway, I hope that helps. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Any comments or suggestions, you can leave them in the section below. And throw us a beer if any of this information helps. Thank you for watching. The links are all in the description.